Chapter 28. Hunter. Hunter studied the old man. He guessed the old fart was probably in his 50s, based on the deep lines etched to his weathered, copper-colored face. He wanted to see fear, a delicious sense of hopelessness in those eyes, but was disappointed to find only fierce determination staring back at him. It irked him. Did the old fool really think he would survive this? "I'm gonna wipe that look off your face," Hunter snarled. "You won't be so smug once I've dealt with them." He gestured toward the other two humans whom his brother Johnny was dragging. "Let go of me!" Ernesto shouted. "Papa!" Santiago cried out. Hunter looked at the two of them, a human in his 30s and that young boy they had kidnapped. He was about to have a delicious meal. Something behind him shifted, halting Hunter's train of thought. He turned around, his eyes widening in shock. The half-breed brat wasn't just getting up. She was rising to her feet, her black fingernails locked around Andres' throat. Hunter watched in disbelief as she pulled the blade from her thigh, the very one he had driven through her. It clattered to the floor. Blood pooled from the wound, but then, astonishingly, the flow stopped. New flesh began to knit itself together, closing the injury. How is she doing that? Hunter thought, his mind reeling. She shouldn't be able to heal herself. She's only a half-breed. Hunter watched in horror as she took her free hand and tore Andres' head straight off with her bare hands. She dropped Andres' head to the floor. It was already starting to turn into dust, along with the rest of his body. He was dead, and this half-breed brat had killed him, had ripped his head off with her bare hands. Cold sweat dripped down his forehead, but he remained frozen, unable to move. He could only watch in stunned silence as she grasped the handle of her broken katana, the one that had been pierced by the blade that was already healed. The wound completely gone. As she rose, she brushed her bloodied silver hair back with a hand stained red. Hunter's gaze locked onto her face, noting the way her muscle fibers tensed and shifted. But what sent a shiver down his spine were her eyes. What the hell was going on with her eyes? They were no longer a ruby red. Instead, the irises and whites of her eyes had turned a deep obsidian black. "One down," she smiled, and for the first time in 100 years, he felt fear for his immortal life. She vanished from his sight, and panic gripped him. He didn't need to guess. She was coming for him. He needed to escape. He flash-stepped, and just as his feet touched the ground, he heard a voice that made his body tremble. "Is that your flash step? That's fucking slow." Agony pierced through him, and he looked down and saw that she had ran her hand straight through his stomach. She took it out, and he collapsed in pain, staring up in disbelief. How was this happening? She was just a half-breed, yet she healed instantly and was now faster than him? "You told me before that I couldn't chop off your brother's head," she said, lifting Hunter's chin with the broken blade of her katana. His eyes met the void of her gaze, and he felt a terror like never before. "Let's try it again, shall we?" she grinned. He realized with a jolt that she was enjoying this. She flash-stepped, vanishing from sight. It took all the force in his lungs to cry out for his brother one last time, "Johnny!" But she was already there, and his brother's head was already rolling to the floor. He hadn't even known what was coming. It had been instant death. She picked up the head. It pooled blood, leaving a trail behind her. The human screamed at the scene, and she didn't even seem to care. When she was in front of him again, she threw down his brother's head, and he looked into the empty eye of his brother. Half of his head had already evaporated into ash. He didn't even want to look at her. He didn't want to meet her eyes again, but despite his dread, he wanted to die with at least an ounce of dignity. Summoning the last of his courage, he raised his head and found the strength to ask his executioner one final question. "What are you?" She lifted her broken katana by the grip. Hunter watched in sheer awe as black flames began to spurt from the shattered blade, coalescing into a new fiery weapon. "I'm a half-breed," she grinned, her voice dripping with satisfaction. The black flame katana swung toward Hunter's neck, and with that, his immortal life came to an end.